A former police officer and soldier who now specialises in risk assessment has said this week that all of us should be more aware of what we should do in the event of an emergency like a terror attack. Lloyd Figgins argues that we live in a time now where terror attacks are very common, and it's routinely innocent bystanders who find themselves the victims of shootings or attacks using vehicles like cars or lorries. And so he thinks we should all develop a better situational awareness to be more attuned to the sights, the sounds and sudden changes in atmosphere which might precipitate an attack. In fact, he thinks we could all have some kind of national programme to sensitise, train and mobilise people to play a bigger part in preventing and dealing with terror attacks. He compares this to the way people in countries which suffer many earthquakes are trained to deal with seismic events. First, welcome to the programme, former police officer and soldier Lloyd Figgins, who's from LFL Global Risk Management. Good morning to you, Lloyd. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning, Jonathan. Just to put you right on one thing, by the way,
Yes.
in your intro piece there, you mentioned about the fact that I think these things are becoming more common or are common. That's not the case. These things are, this is one thing we need to put into perspective. These events are exceptionally rare. If you were to put that into context, your chances of actually getting caught up in a terror attack when you're overseas is about 1 in 20 million.
So why bother worrying about it then?
Well, the thing is that when they do happen, they happen exceptionally quickly. They catch people unaware, and people aren't prepared to actually deal with the event. And that's why some of the times we get more people getting caught up in it. As that piece you had there from the Tunisia attack, they sat down, they ordered a drink, they didn't know what to do. So what we're looking at is how we can actually raise that public awareness in order that people already have a plan in mind that should something happen, they know what the plan is and how they're going to execute it.
So tell us then, what do you do? Okay, if we work on the fact that you say it's very rare, although, I mean, you try telling that to people in France at the moment, I'd imagine they're just waiting. It's one attack after another, isn't it, in France at the moment? It must feel like that. And I'm sure there are people in London who are also concerned that they may get caught up in this kind of terrorist attack. If you suddenly hear gunfire, if you suddenly see a vehicle that is starting to behave in a peculiar fashion, what should you do?
Well, first of all, what we've got to look at is what we describe as those pre-event indicators. So this is something that is not normal. Now, in our everyday lives, in our situation where we live in towns or we might go to visit London or something like that, we have a baseline of what we know is normal. So what we're really looking for is those anomalies. And the interesting thing is on those pieces that you played, the first one with the Tunisia attack, the lady there spoke about the fact that she thought it sounded like fireworks. And this is something that we hear a lot, is people hear a sound and they recognize it as something else. But part of that is they want it to be something else. So then, again, when we heard the chap talking about the Westminster attacks, he talked about the screech of tyres, the vehicle mounting the curb. All of these are small pre-event indicators that is the warning sign that you need to actually do something about it. So when you ask about what we do about it, the government advice is very much run, hide, tell. So you run away from it, and I think in all of those situations you heard about people using the term run. If you can't run, then you need to hide, and you need to find something to hide behind that is going to be structurally sound and where you're not going to be found. If you can get into a room that is lockable, then that's where you need to go. And then the next thing you need to do with the tell is to communicate that, to call the emergency services and let them know what's actually going on. However, if you take that and look at the American example, the US example is actually run, hide, fight. And they advocate that you actually, when you're caught in a situation and there's no option to run, there's no option to hide, then you need to fight, and fight with every bone in your body.
So you don't play dead?
Well, you know, this is an interesting one, Jonathan, because in so many cases there are people who have played dead. When we think about the Westgate Mall in Kenya, in Nairobi, then people played dead there. People have often played dead. They did it in Sousse in Syria. And it is part of the hide side of things because you're trying to hide yourself. You're trying to minimize your profile to those attackers.
If you end up in a situation though where you're being expected to fight, and I know you said that was the American model, not our model. I mean, most of these terrorists seem to be armed. They seemed to have some kind of weapon on them, whether it's a knife or a gun. I mean, ordinary members of the general public don't stand any chance, do they?
No, and that's the key thing. And the other thing we've got to understand is that often these terrorists, they've had time to plan this. They've had time to prepare themselves for it, and they've had time to train. So in the piece I wrote in the Telegraph yesterday, that was advocating that actually one of the ways that we can fight back is by training the public in how to react to these situations. How are they going to get from a point of danger to a point of safety? How are they going to identify those safe havens that they can get to, and how they're going to get to them? And if they're in a position that other people have been caught up in the attack and there are injuries, how do they help those people? How do they treat those people from a first responder point of view?
Of course, the problem with all of this is that you can, on a calm Friday morning, you can sit and come up with this plan of what you would do. But so often I would imagine these terror attacks take people by such immense surprise, and it's so disorientating and so bewildering what is going on around you. I would imagine a large number of people just completely freeze to the spot and don't know what to do.
No, you're absolutely right, Jonathan, and that is the benefit of having training. And I'm talking about hands-on training. So when you think about the police, you think about the emergency services, you think about the military. Often we will hear people who have been involved in those events, and I'm talking about the emergency services or the military, and when those people are interviewed afterwards, they will often say, I actually don't remember too much about what happened, the training just kicked in. And that training element is absolutely key, because once people have received training, then it's almost as if the mind, the brain has seen that situation before and therefore is better placed to actually do something about the situation it faces. And that's why I would advocate the article I wrote yesterday is a follow-on from the book I wrote, Looking for Lemons, where we're looking at those hazards and looking at mitigation measures that we can put in place for those hazards. And training is a big part of that. Now, in Singapore actually rolled out a program for their citizens last September, which is called SG Secure, and it allows every citizen in Singapore to take part in citizen programs that would involve first aid, how to detect the signs of insurgency, the sorts of insignia to look for, types of graffiti that might actually give that first clue that somebody is actually plotting an attack. So it brings the public on board. It gives them a great awareness as to what to look for and what to do. And this is something that is provided by the government.
I accept that, but then isn't the flip side to all of this? But if we start doing that, if we start going down that line, the terrorists really have won. They want to frighten people. They want to change people's lives. If we start going through national training schemes to cope with it, we are playing absolutely into what they want.
Well, I don't think I think terrorism is just one part of this, Jonathan. I think we've got to have a look at road traffic accidents globally kill 1.2 million people a year. So if we were to have a look about if you had a trained population and there was a traffic accident on the motorway or one of the A roads or anywhere, even in your town centre, and you had a population that was trained to administer immediate care to those casualties before the emergency services arrived, then that surely has got to benefit. We're getting caught up with the whole terrorist thing, but the benefits of having a trained population, as we saw in the Second World War, as you alluded to in your opening piece there, about countries that are susceptible to earthquakes, where they have a civil defence force that is trained by the government and can react when something goes wrong.
Good to talk to you, Lloyd. Very interesting. Thank you so much. Lloyd Figgins there. Well, if you want to comment, you can, of course, drop me a line.